The millionaire unexpectedly returned home a week early, deeply concerned about his ailing daughter. But upon opening the door, he was stunned by the scene confronting him. The living room floor was littered with trash and spoiled food, and his wife was passed out sound asleep on the couch. He hurried to his daughter's room and immediately called 911 when he saw his daughter performing a strange action. The snow and wind outside the car window whipped wildly against the city of Chicago, turning the skyscrapers into hazy ghosts in the white expanse. Inside the warm car, Arthur Sterling felt anything but comfortable. He stared intently at the glowing phone screen, his thumb unconsciously rubbing over the list of recent video calls. 3 months. The trip scheduled to last until spring had ended a week early thanks to his assertiveness at the negotiating table. But the real reason he left the celebratory party in London wasn't about the contracts. It was about the calls that lasted less than 2 minutes each night. "Don't worry, Lily just drifted off to sleep," Elena had said last night, her smile as radiant and perfect as always. But in the corner of the screen, Arthur had caught a glimpse of a tangled lock of hair and his daughter's small shoulders trembling under the blanket. That wasn't the peaceful sleep of a child. That was sheer exhaustion. Arthur slid his phone into his jacket pocket. He had lied to his wife, saying he would return next week. Sometimes a surprise was the only way to verify the terrible premonition that was tearing him up inside. The car stopped outside the gates of the Lake Forest estate. Arthur signaled the driver to wait. He stepped out himself. The biting wind slapped his face, but Arthur didn't shiver from the cold. He shivered at what he saw. The ornamental iron gate, the pride of the estate's security, was standing ajar. Black trash bags were piled up in the corner of the garden, half covered in snow, like festering sores on the pristine white snow that no one had bothered to clear away. Arthur inserted his key into the lock. The heavy oak door swung open, and instantly the silence of the house swallowed him whole. There was no scent of lavender oil that Elena always boasted to her friends, was the aroma of affluence. Instead, the air was thick with the smell of a party long over, but never cleaned up the sour stench of stale wine, the greasy odor of overnight pizza, and the cold tobacco smoke clinging to the curtains. Arthur stepped through the living room. Empty pizza boxes were scattered across the expensive Persian rug. A glass of red wine had been spilled, the liquid splotched across the oak tabletop like a deep-dried stain. And there, on the cream velvet sofa, Elena lay asleep. She was still wearing her glittering evening gown, but the strap had slipped down one shoulder, her smeared makeup transforming her beautiful face into a distorted mask. She was sound asleep, her breath thick with alcohol, completely unaware that the husband she thought was across the ocean was standing right before her. Arthur didn't wake her. He didn't want to hear any explanation right now. His feet automatically carried him toward the staircase where the shadows seemed thickest. Each wooden step creaked dryly under his weight. The higher he went, the more suffocating the air became. Arthur paused outside his daughter's room. The door was slightly ajar, leaving a dark sliver of an opening. He pushed the door inward. A foul stench immediately assaulted his senses, twisting his stomach into knots. It was the smell of stale urine, the musty odor of an unventilated room, and the sharp scent of strong disinfectant. The curtains were tightly drawn, turning the room into an airtight box completely separated from the outside world. Arthur squinted into the darkness. On the expansive bed, a small figure was curled up under a thin blanket. Arthur approached, his breath catching in his throat. Lily was dreadfully thin, her cheeks pale and hollow. The metallic leg brace was still locked tightly onto her left leg, but the skin around the brace's edge was swollen and turned a deep bruised purple as if it hadn't been removed for weeks. The child stirred. Lily tried to push her thin arms against the mattress to lift herself, but her weak body didn't obey. She fell back onto the pillow, her breath labored and choppy. Her eyes were wide open, staring blankly into the void where Arthur stood, yet there was no flicker of recognition in her cloudy gaze. "Daddy." The call came faint and fragile, like a kitten's cry tearing through the room's stillness. "Where are you, Daddy? Why is it always dark? My tummy hurts so bad." Tears welled in Arthur's eyes, hot and painful. He couldn't endure another second. He rushed to the bedside, kneeling on the wooden floor. He reached out, wanting to embrace his small child, wanting to say he was home and everything would be all right. But as Arthur's trembling fingers gently touched his daughter's shoulder, Lily jumped back as if she had received an electrical shock. She didn't turn to look at him. She recoiled, pressing her back tightly into the corner of the bed, covering her head with her hands in a state of extreme panic. Don't lock me up. I'll sleep, Auntie. Please don't lock me in the closet." Lily's shriek tore through the space, turning the room into a cage of fear. Arthur's hand froze in midair, trembling. He didn't dare touch his daughter, didn't dare comfort her, because his presence now felt like a threat to Lily. She remained huddled in the corner of the bed, hands clutching her head, mumbling meaningless pleas. Quick footsteps ascending the stairs broke through Arthur's paralysis. Elena appeared in the doorway, her breathing ragged, her messy hair spilling over a face that still bore the smudges of deep sleep. "Arthur, when did you get back?" Arthur didn't turn around. He pulled out his phone, pressing his finger hard against the screen. "I need an ambulance dispatched to 42 Lake Forest immediately. My daughter has a high fever and is delirious. Right now." Elena stepped forward, her voice beginning to tremble. "Arthur, listen to me. I just dozed off for a bit. Maria, that girl neglected Lily again. I told her she had to watch the child." Arthur ended the call, placing the phone firmly on the bed. He went into the bathroom, soaked a washcloth in cold water, and wrung it out. He returned, gently approaching Lily. She was still shaking violently, eyes tightly shut. "Lily, it's Daddy. I'm just wiping your face. It's okay, sweetie." He touched the wet cloth to his daughter's forehead. Lily whimpered, but this time she didn't scream, perhaps too exhausted. When Arthur lifted the blanket to check her, his stomach tightened into a knot. The metallic leg brace was still locked tightly onto Lily's left leg. The skin around the edge was swollen, turning a deep bruised purple. The wail of the ambulance siren sounded in the distance, then stopped right outside the gate. Medics rushed upstairs, swift and professional. They carefully placed Lily onto a stretcher, mindful of her injured leg. Elena started to rush toward the door, tears beginning to flow. "Oh my God, my daughter, don't hurt her." Arthur stopped directly in front of her. He looked straight into those eyes, trying to feign panic. "You take your own car. Do not come near her right now." He turned his back and followed the stretcher, leaving Elena frozen in the messy living room, her hands tightly clutching the crumpled fabric of her dress. Presbyterian Hospital was bathed in cold white light. The smell of disinfectant made Arthur feel nauseous. He paced back and forth along the corridor, each step marking the passage of time. In a distant waiting chair, Elna sat huddled, holding her knees. She sniffled occasionally, glancing toward the emergency room door, and then at Arthur. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was this bad," she said, her voice choked. "I tried so hard, Arthur, but I'm dealing with depression. Since you left, I've been so lonely. I didn't know what to do." Arthur stopped looking at her. He said nothing, simply continuing his pacing. His silence made Elena even more uneasy. She lowered her head, resuming her silent performance of weeping. The emergency room door opened. Dr. Anderson stepped out, removing his surgical mask. He looked around and motioned to Arthur. "Mr. Sterling, step into my office for a moment." Arthur followed the doctor into the small consultation room, closing the door behind them. Dr. Anderson sat down, sighed, and slid a folder toward Arthur. "We have treated the leg injury and brought down her fever. But that is not the biggest concern." He pulled out a few close-up photographs. "Look here. These pressure sores are due to lying in one position for too long without being turned. And here," he pointed to another photo, "the red marks on her wrists. They look like someone held her down tightly. But what concerns me most is her reaction. Every time a female nurse approaches to change the dressing, she recoils and her heart rate spikes. That's a classic sign of psychological distress." Arthur gripped the edge of the desk. "And the fever." Dr. Anderson produced a printout of lab results. He circled a number in red pen. "It's not a common viral fever. We found a very high concentration of antihistamine in her blood. This is the primary ingredient in strong cough syrups or tranquilizers. It wasn't administered accidentally just once. It has accumulated over time. Arthur picked up the paper. The numbers danced before his eyes. His daughter wasn't sick. His daughter had been sedated to keep her quiet, to keep her still, to ensure she didn't bother anyone. "I understand," Arthur said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you, doctor." He folded the paper, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and walked out. The corridor still stretched long and desolate. Elena saw him emerge and immediately jumped up, running toward him. "What did the doctor say? Is she okay? I'm so worried." Arthur pulled the crumpled lab report out and tossed it into her lap. Elena clumsily grabbed it, opening it to read. Her face drained of color when she saw the red circled line. "This... Arthur, I swear I don't know. It must have been Maria. I saw her giving the child something before she left. I thought it was vitamins." Arthur stared hard at her. "When did Maria leave?" Elena swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously. "About 3 months ago, the first week after you left. I noticed my diamond engagement ring was missing from the bedroom. I asked her about it. She denied everything, and that night she packed her things and ran off. I was so scared I went into shock, which is why I've been so depressed. I meant to tell you, but I didn't want to worry you and affect your work." Arthur studied his wife. He saw the quiver at the corner of her mouth, saw the way she clutched the lab report as if wanting to shred it. He recalled the video calls, Lily's sluggish appearance, the messy house, and the smell of alcohol. A brutal picture was slowly coming into sharp focus in his mind, but he needed more than speculation. He needed undeniable proof. He took a deep breath, relaxed his facial muscles, and nodded slightly. "All right, I understand." Elena looked up, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. You believe me, don't you? I truly didn't want this to happen. You stay here and look after Lily." Arthur said, his voice eerily calm. "She needs family nearby right now. I have to go home and get some necessities for her. Clean clothes, her teddy bear, things she likes." Elena sighed in relief, wiping away tears and nodding rapidly. "Yes, you go ahead. I'll stay by her side. Don't worry." Arthur turned and walked away, his shoes clicking steadily on the corridor floor. He wasn't going home to get clothes. He was going back to find the answer to the most agonizing question. Why in her own house did his daughter have to endure hell? And where had Maria, the devoted caregiver, truly gone? The black sports car tore through the night and the blizzard, speeding down the desolate road leading back to the Lake Forest estate. Arthur gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. The silence in the car was now more frightening than the howling wind outside. In his mind, the image of Lily recoiling in the hospital bed, and Elena's words repeated like a stuck film reel. He would not allow himself to panic. Anger now was useless. It would only cloud his judgment. He needed proof. He needed the stark truth, not mere accusations. Elena thought she had pulled the wool over his eyes, that he was still the foolish husband concerned only with making money. She was profoundly mistaken. Upon arriving home, Arthur didn't turn on the main lights. He went straight upstairs, his steps heavy but decisive. He didn't enter the master bedroom where the remnants of debauchery still lingered. He went straight into Lily's room. The room still held the pervasive smell of dampness and stale urine, like an open wound that wouldn't close. Arthur switched on the bedside lamp. The faint yellow light fell upon the floral wallpaper walls that should have been filled with his daughter's laughter. Now it looked more like an abandoned storage closet than a child's room. Arthur began his search. He worked systematically the same way he checked corporate ledgers. He opened the closet. Instead of neatly folded clothes, he found a pile of dirty laundry wadded up and stuffed deep into the corner. Stained nightgowns, lonely socks. Elena had been too lazy even to toss them into the hamper. He checked the trash can in the corner. Beneath a layer of crumpled tissues were 3 empty cough syrup bottles. Arthur picked one up, extra strength. 3 bottles in 3 months. It wasn't medicine. It was a tool for silencing. Arthur knelt on the cold wooden floor, leaning down to look under the bed. Dust was thickly layered. He reached out into the darkness. His fingers touched something hard, flat, and cold. He pulled it out. A brand new iPad, pale pink casing covered in dust and cobwebs. Arthur remembered the day he gave it to Lily before leaving. "So Daddy and you can see each other every day," he had said. Lily had hugged it like a treasure. He pressed the power button. The screen was dark. Dead battery. Arthur stood up, found the charger in the desk drawer. He plugged it in, sat cross-legged on the floor, leaning against the bed frame. The moments waiting for the Apple logo to appear felt like an eternity. He could clearly hear his own heart hammering in his chest. The screen lit up. Arthur entered the password, Lily's birthday. The home screen appeared, featuring a picture of the two of them smiling brightly in the park last summer. Arthur glanced at the top right corner of the screen. The Wi-Fi icon was off. He tried to switch it back on, and the device connected immediately. The house network was working perfectly. That meant the Wi-Fi on the device had been manually disabled. Arthur opened the Photos app. The library revealed a series of new videos and audio files. The dates were clear, spanning the entire 3 months of his absence. They all lay dormant in the device's memory, never having been sent. Messages sent into the void. Arthur's hand trembled as he pressed the first video recorded during the second week after he left. The screen shook violently. The low, unsteady angle showed the recorder hiding behind a slightly open door looking down into the living room. Bright crystal chandelier light illuminated the party below. In the frame, Elena stood among a group of friends, raising a glass of red wine, laughing loudly. She wore a brand new silk dress, shimmering jewelry. That crippled kid. Elena's voice rang out clearly through the iPad speaker, overpowering the background music. Oh, whatever instant noodles are fine for her. Why bother cooking elaborate meals? What difference does it make? She's stuck in bed. She's not burning any calories. Her friends burst into laughter. Elena turned, showing off the crocodile skin handbag on her arm. I sank this month's grocery money into this Hermes bag. Isn't it gorgeous? My old man will never know. Arthur felt the blood rush to his face. He heard a very small whisper right next to the iPad's microphone, as if Lily were leaning into it to pour out her heart. Daddy. Auntie Elena lied. She bought a beautiful bag, but she won't buy my medicine. She says it's too expensive. My tummy hurts so bad, Daddy. I'm hungry. Arthur had to stop for a moment to steady himself. He rubbed his face, trying to swallow the bitter lump in his throat. He clicked the next video recorded a month later. This time, Lily was filming herself. She had placed the iPad on a table or pillow, the angle shooting upward. Lily was noticeably thinner than in the previous video. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks smeared with tears. She was holding a plastic bowl containing a thin, light brown liquid. She spooned it up, sobbing as she ate. Daddy, Lily said, her voice choked. Today, Miss Maria cooked soup for me. It was very good, Daddy. But Miss Maria cried. She said she had to sell Grandma's ring to buy meat for the soup. Lily paused, swallowing a spoonful of soup as if swallowing all her misery. Daddy, when you get back, please pay Miss Maria back. She doesn't have any money left. Auntie Elena didn't give her any money. She said if I don't get medicine, I won't get better. Arthur's heart twisted with pain. Maria. The caregiver Elena had falsely accused of being a thief and running away. She hadn't run. She had stayed. She had sold her own family keepsake to feed his daughter while his wife used his money to buy handbags and alcohol. This truth was more devastating than anything Arthur could have imagined. He scrolled his finger down to the bottom of the list. There was a very long audio file recorded the night of the biggest storm last month. The screen was black. There was no image, only furious blue sound waves signaling chaotic noise. Arthur pressed play. The iPad screen was black with only faint blue sound waves pulsating violently with every noise emanating from the speaker. Arthur sat motionless on the edge of his daughter's bed, gripping the tablet as if it were his only life raft in a raging sea. He closed his eyes, allowing his hearing to guide him back to that stormy night, the night he was absent. The first sound was a deafening clatter like dishes being swept off a counter. Next came the heavy, hurried footsteps, not of one person, but of multiple people. Arthur held his breath, listening to every beat of the past. "What do you think you're doing, you horrible woman? I told you not to feed her. Are you defying me?" Elena's voice rang out sharp and full of malice. There was nothing left of the sweet woman who always called him "my darling husband" on the phone. This was the voice of a warden punishing a captive. Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine. That was his wife, the woman he had trusted with his daughter. The response was Maria's voice, trembling yet resolute. "You've starved the child for 2 days. Look at her, she's having convulsions. Cut my salary, I'll endure it. I don't need your money, but I won't let the child starve to death. You are a devil." Arthur pictured Maria, small in stature, standing guard in front of Lily's bed, shielding the child from the wicked stepmother. He heard her gasping breath, her sobs of indignation. She had been backed into a corner with nothing left to lose but her conscience. "Shut up!" Elena shrieked, shattering Maria's courage. "You dare talk back to me in my own house? Who do you think you are, security? Drag this thief out of my house immediately. She stole my diamond ring. I caught her rummaging through the bedroom." Arthur gritted his teeth. The diamond ring again. The false accusation Elena had used to cover all her transgressions. She didn't just fire Maria. She destroyed her reputation, turning the protector into a criminal. The heavy steps of the neighborhood security detail rushed in. Arthur heard a struggle, the sound of fabric tearing, and Maria's desperate screams. "Let go of me. I didn't steal anything. I just wanted to feed the child. Please, Mrs. Elena, please, don't do this." But her pleas drowned in the cruelty. The sound of dragging echoed on the wooden floor, Maria fighting back. "Get out of here. If you ever dare to come back, I'll call the police and have you deported. Did you hear me clearly?" Elena's voice commanded coldly. Arthur heard Lily's wail, the heartbreaking cry of a helpless child, watching the only person who loved her being dragged away. "Miss Maria, don't send Miss Maria away. Please don't go. Don't leave me. Auntie, don't kick her out. Lily, don't die. Try to wait for your dad. Your dad is coming home soon." "Lily?" Maria's voice echoed distantly, blending into the howling storm outside. And then, a loud thud. The front door slammed shut, cutting off all external sounds. A deathly silence descended upon the room, heavier and more terrifying than the screams that preceded it. Arthur felt as though he himself had been locked in the darkness with his daughter. The recording wasn't over. In the suffocating stillness, Lily's ragged breathing and sobs were vividly clear. She was crying alone, huddled in this cold, dark room. Her sniffles mixed with terrified whispers. "Daddy," Lily's voice was weak, fragile as a thread. "The device can't send messages. Why can't you hear me? Did you abandon me? I'm so scared, Daddy. Miss Maria is gone. No one will feed me anymore." Arthur turned off the device. The room fell into absolute silence. He sat there motionless, gripping the iPad so tightly his knuckles were white. Tears streamed down the cheeks of a man who had never cried in front of anyone. He didn't wipe them away. He let them fall hot and salty, a painful reminder of his own neglect. He realized he wasn't just a deceived victim, he was an unwitting accomplice. He had been too busy making money, too busy building skyscrapers, and had forgotten to build a safe home for his daughter. He had allowed a monster to run rampant under his own roof, tormenting his beloved daughter and the only woman who truly cared for her. Arthur slowly stood up. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic hammering of his heart. He reached up and wiped his tears, a decisive, powerful gesture. He couldn't just sit here in misery. Tears solved nothing. He needed action. He needed justice. And most importantly, he needed to find Maria. He slipped the iPad into his inner jacket pocket, right against his heart like a solemn vow. He walked out of Lily's room, not looking back at the mess. He proceeded down the dark corridor toward the staircase leading to the service area. His steps echoed steadily on the wooden floor like the gavel of a judge preparing to pass sentence. He walked past the messy living room, past the cold kitchen, stopping before a plain wooden door tucked behind the stairs. That was Maria's room. The door was ajar cold. Arthur pushed it open, flipping the light switch. The dim yellow glow of the old bulb revealed an empty room. There was no heating. The air was as cold as outside. The furnishings were sparse, only a simple metal bed and a small wooden cabinet. Arthur looked around, his sharp gaze sweeping every corner. He didn't know what he was looking for, but his instinct told him the last pieces of the truth were still here. He moved toward the bed, peering into the dark space beneath it. There, tucked loosely against the wall, was a battered, dusty shoebox. It lay there, silent and humble like its owner, but Arthur sensed it contained a heavy secret. He reached out and pulled the box toward him. Inside the shoebox there was no money, no jewelry, nor secret letters, only a stack of crumpled, worn papers, carefully smoothed out and neatly stacked. Arthur picked up the first paper. It was a pale pink pawnbroker slip, the cheap kind of paper often found in run-down neighborhood shops. The ink was slightly faded, but the words were legible. Customer name Maria Gonzalez, item 14K gold cross necklace, amount pledged $45 USD. Arthur frowned. He remembered that necklace. Maria always wore it. She had once said it was the only keepsake her mother left her before passing away. Why would she sell it for such a pittance? He looked down at the date on the receipt. November 12th. Arthur's memory flashed back. He opened his work schedule on his phone. November the 12th. That was the day Elena texted him saying Lily had a mild viral fever and needed rest and supplements. Arthur turned the next paper, another receipt. Item silver ring engraved Mother, $15 USD, November 20th. And another. Item woman's gray winter coat, $10 USD, December 15th. In the depths of Chicago's brutal winter, Maria had sold her only warm coat for $10. Arthur's hands began to tremble. He quickly flipped to the bottom of the stack. Other types of papers were interspersed. Receipts from CVS Pharmacy, receipts from 7-Eleven. Tylenol children's fever reducer, gauze, rubbing alcohol, total $42 USD. November 12th, whole milk canned chicken soup. Sandwich bread, total $18 USD. November 20th. Arthur spread the papers out on the cold floor. Two parallel timelines appeared starkly before him like a silent indictment. The day Maria sold her necklace was the day she bought fever reducer for Lily. The day Maria sold her ring was the day she bought milk and soup. The day Maria sold her coat was the day she bought extra gauze and disinfectant for the pressure sores on Lily's leg. A painful truth struck Arthur's chest, taking his breath away. Elena hadn't just cut Maria's salary. She had cut off all means of survival. And Maria, the poor immigrant woman, had not chosen to flee and save herself. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to sell off every last bit of her own warmth, sacrificing herself to sustain the neglected daughter of the millionaire owner. Rage erupted in Arthur like a volcano. He pulled out his phone, pressing his finger so hard on the screen, it felt like the glass might crack. He logged into his banking app, accessing the secondary account he had left for Elena with an unlimited limit for household spending. The transaction history appeared long and continuous. Arthur scrolled quickly, his eyes burning. There wasn't a single transaction at a supermarket, not a single transaction at a pharmacy. Instead, Las Vegas online casino payment, $5,000 USD. Chanel store, $8,500 USD. Luxury spa and resort, $2,000 USD. Personal transfer, Nick, $3,000 USD. Tens of thousands of dollars a week were squandered on Elena's sick pleasures, while Maria had to sell her coat for $10 to buy soup for Lily. "You damn monster!" Arthur roared, throwing his phone onto the floor. It skidded and hit the bed frame. He clutched his head, running his fingers through his hair, pulling hard. The guilt weighed on him more heavily than 1,000 tons of steel. He had harbored a snake. He had allowed his money to become a tool for torturing his own daughter and the family's benefactor. He owed Maria. He owed her Lily's life. He owed her an apology that he could never repay in his lifetime. Ring, ring, ring. The phone rang from the corner of the room, shattering the suffocating silence. Arthur scrambled to pick it up. The screen showed the name Detective Ray. He swiped to answer immediately. "Ray, tell me, Have you found her?" Detective Ray's voice on the other end was rushed, mixed with the loud whistling wind. "We found her, Mr. Sterling, but you need to prepare yourself. The situation is not good." "Where is she?" Arthur demanded, his voice sharp, his heart pounding. "Under Overpass 4, south side of the city, where the displaced homeless congregate. We've pinpointed her exact location. She's very weak, Mr. Sterling. People here say she's had a high fever for days and hasn't eaten. If we don't get there fast, I'm on my way." Arthur cut him off, ending the call. He didn't hesitate for a second. He snatched the stack of bills and receipts from the floor, stuffing everything into his jacket pocket along with the iPad. He bolted out of the room, running down the stairs, flying through the messy living room without a glance. The front door burst open. The snow and wind slammed into Arthur's face, but he felt no cold. He jumped into the sports car parked in the driveway, starting the engine. The engine roared like a wounded beast. The car sped away into the night, leaving behind the magnificent yet cold estate like a tomb. Arthur floored the accelerator, charging into the infinite night to find the last glimmer of conscience left in the blizzard of his life. Arthur slammed down on the accelerator, and the sports car gave a fierce roar before speeding away into the night. The faint streetlights of the Lake Forest district receded quickly, the luxurious sleeping mansions disappearing. In their place were dilapidated blocks of houses, pockmarked roads, and the weak light from half-broken street lamps. Arthur gripped the wheel, his eyes glued to the dark road ahead. The sudden shift in surroundings from paradise to perdition twisted his stomach. He had lived too long in his ivory tower, too long to forget how brutal the world outside was. And right now, the woman who had saved his daughter's life lay somewhere in that brutal world, fighting death alone. The car slowed, turning onto a muddy dirt road beneath an overpass. The headlights swept across mountains of garbage, old shopping carts and makeshift shacks built from cardboard boxes, ripped nylon, and whatever else could be salvaged. The smell of dampness, rotting trash, and the palpable smell of desperation flooded the car cabin the moment Arthur rolled down the window. The cold wind from beneath the overpass whistled through, bringing a bone-chilling cold. Arthur turned off the engine and stepped out. His polished leather shoes immediately sank into the thick mud. A man in a long coat and his collar turned up to hide half his face stepped out of the shadows. It was Detective Ray. "This way, Mr. Sterling." Ray said, his voice hoarse from the cold. Arthur followed Ray, navigating the narrow paths between the shacks. The homeless people were huddled around small fires, their eyes watching Arthur with caution and curiosity. The appearance of a man in an expensive suit in this place was like an alien landing on another planet. They stopped at the dampest, most secluded corner where water dripped constantly from the bridge above, forming pools of black mud. A thin, stained mattress was laid directly onto the cold ground. On it, a thin figure was curled up under a fragile blanket. Arthur held his breath. He stepped closer, shining his phone's flashlight onto the woman's face. It was Maria, but not the healthy, cheerful Maria he remembered. Her cheekbones were sunken, her skin gray. Her breathing was wheezing ragged like a bellows, her chest rising and falling painfully with every inhalation. She had a high fever, her forehead burning hot, cold sweat, pasting her hair to her temples. Arthur knelt down, reaching out to check the pulse on her wrist, but paused. Maria's hand, chapped and cracked from the freezing cold, was tightly clutching something to her chest. Her fingers were stiff, yet she held on firmly. Arthur gently pried her fingers open one by one. The object fell into his palm. A tiny pink butterfly hair clip. Lily's favorite cheap hair clip, the one she always wore when Maria braided her hair. Arthur's throat constricted, bitter and tight. She didn't hold on to money, didn't hold on to jewelry. She held onto a fragment of memory of the child she loved as her own. In this bone-chilling cold, that tiny hair clip was perhaps the only source of warmth helping her cling to life. Tears fell from Arthur's eyes, hot mixing with the dirt on Maria's hand. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead against her cold hand. "I'm sorry. Maria. I'm so sorry." The belated apology echoed in the whistling wind, faint but profoundly sincere. Arthur Sterling, the man who had never bowed his head to anyone, was now kneeling before a poor immigrant woman begging for forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. The warmth from Arthur's hand seemed to stir Maria slightly. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy and exhausted. She looked at Arthur, her gaze unfocused and dreamy. She didn't know if he was real or just an illusion of her fever. Her lips moved, cracked and dry. Arthur leaned his ear close to hear better. "Lily." The whisper was weak as a sigh. "Has she eaten yet?" Arthur's heart shattered into pieces. Even when she was dying, her first thought was not for herself. "Don't let her starve. She hurts so much." Arthur tightly gripped her hand, nodding rapidly, even though he knew she might not see him. "She has eaten. She is safe now. I promise you." His answer seemed to act as a tranquilizer. Maria exhaled softly and her eyes slowly closed. Arthur stood up abruptly. He removed his own heavy coat and wrapped it around Maria's frail body. He lifted her up gently but decisively. His expensive suit was stained with mud, but he didn't care. Right now, the life in his arms was more precious than all the wealth he possessed. "Call my private physician. Tell him to prepare the most specialized emergency room at Presbyterian immediately. I want her to live." Arthur commanded Ray, his voice firm and allowing no delay. He strode quickly through the mud puddles, carrying the woman who had sacrificed everything out of this earthly hell. He placed Maria in the back seat, adjusting the temperature to the warmest setting. He looked at her face in the rearview mirror one last time before pressing the accelerator. The car sped away, leaving the darkness and cold behind. Arthur pulled out his phone and dialed the number of the Sterling Corporation's chief lawyer. "Prepare the filing," he said, his voice cold and sharp as a blade. "Not just divorce. I want criminal prosecution, aggravated child mistreatment, false imprisonment, extortion, embezzlement, everything that will put her away for the maximum time." The line was silent for a second before the lawyer responded concisely. "Understood, sir." Arthur ended the call, staring straight at the road ahead. The pain had solidified into iron resolve. Elena thought she could walk over others and live luxuriously with his money. She was terribly wrong. Arthur would show her how steep the cost of cruelty truly was. Arthur entered the lobby of Presbyterian Hospital. He had stopped by a nearby hotel to shower and change into a fresh suit. Outwardly, he had returned to being the polished, composed Arthur Sterling, but inside was a volcano waiting to erupt. His gaze was icy, sweeping through the VIP waiting area, as if searching for prey. In the corner, Elena sat cross-legged on a soft leather chair. She had managed to reapply her makeup, covering the dark circles and fatigue with a thick layer of powder. In her hand was a bouquet of white lilies, expensive flowers purchased from the hospital's gift shop. She looked into the window's reflection, rehearsing a mournful, remorseful look, adjusting the stray locks of hair across her forehead to look suitably tragic. Seeing Arthur approach, Elena immediately stood up. She rushed toward him, arms wide open, tears expertly welling up in the corners of her eyes. "Arthur, oh my God, where have you been so long? I've been so worried. I was afraid you had abandoned your family here." She tried to embrace him, but Arthur stood still as a stone statue. He neither accepted her embrace nor retreated. The coldness radiating from him stopped Elena mid-embrace. Her hands hovered in the air before slowly dropping, clutching at the lapel of his suit jacket. "What's wrong, darling? Are you exhausted?" "I know. This happened so suddenly. I was shocked too. I promise I'll take better care of Lily. I'll hire a new, more reputable nanny than that Maria woman." Arthur looked down at the hand clutching his jacket. There was no warmth in the touch, only the cold artificiality emanating from her meticulously manicured nails. "Elena." Arthur spoke her name, his voice low and steady. "Yes, I'm here, tell me. Where is the diamond ring I gave you for our engagement?" The sudden question startled Elena momentarily. She blinked, the smile on her face stiffening, but she quickly regained her composure. Why are you asking about that now?" I just want to know. Where is it? Elena sighed, her expression shifting to one of pain and injustice. I already told you that Maria, she took it. I left it on the dressing table that day, and when I came back, it was gone. I asked her, she denied everything, and then she ran off that night. I was going to call the police, but I felt sorry for her being poor and an immigrant, so I let it go. I didn't want to make a scene and affect our family's reputation. Arthur looked straight into her eyes. He saw the blind confidence there. She believed her lies were so perfect that no one could question them. She believed Arthur was still the busy man, only concerned with business results and easily manipulated by a few tears. He nodded softly, a slow nod confirming the final disgust he felt for the woman standing before him. You felt sorry for her, Arthur repeated, his voice emotionless. How noble. Elena smiled, thinking she had convinced him. She took another step, intending to lean her head on his shoulder. I knew you'd understand, Arthur. I only want what's best for everyone. Now shall we go see Lily together? I'm sure she misses her parents. Arthur took a step back, creating a clear physical distance between them. Elena faltered, looking up at him quizzically. Just then, the chime of the elevator behind Arthur sounded. The doors opened. The heavy footsteps of leather shoes clicking on the marble floor broke the waiting area's quiet. The chief of police for Lake Forest County, in a crisp uniform, stepped out, accompanied by Arthur's private lawyer. They were holding thick folders of documents. Elena turned to look. A brief flicker of confusion crossed her face at the sight of the police, but she quickly steadied herself. She turned back to Arthur, the smile returning to her lips, though strained. The police are here, darling. That's good. They must be here to take statements about Maria the thief, right? I knew you wouldn't let this go. I'm ready to testify to make sure that girl pays the price. Arthur looked at her, his gaze distant, devoid of any affection. He cut short the smile she was trying to maintain with one cold, decisive sentence, like a judge's final verdict. Have you finished your performance, Elena? The smile on Elena's face vanished. She looked at Arthur, then at the police chief, who was approaching with a stern, unfriendly expression. A vague sense of dread began to creep into her mind, but she still didn't understand what was truly happening. Arthur motioned for his lawyer to step forward. The lawyer placed a glossy black briefcase on the glass table. The click of the lock sounded dryly, like the final slam of a prison door, signaling the permanent end of the clumsy drama Elena had painstakingly staged. The black leather briefcase was opened by the lawyer. Inside were not stacks of money or familiar million-dollar contracts. Arthur reached in, slowly pulling out two objects that were completely out of place in the luxurious waiting room. A battered shoebox, its edges frayed, and a pale pink iPad, its screen smudged with fingerprints. He placed them on the glass tabletop right next to the white lilies Elena had bought. The stark contrast between the humble box and the fake glamour of the flowers was a silent indictment. Elena stared at the box, her carefully plucked eyebrows drawn together in confusion. What is this? She asked, her voice beginning to lose its earlier confidence. Are you bringing trash into a hospital? Arthur didn't answer. He opened the box, taking out the crumpled papers he had found under Maria's bed. He spread each pawn slip on the table, lining them up neatly in front of Elena. Gold cross necklace, silver ring engraved Mother, winter coat. Arthur read aloud each item on the receipt. Do you know what these things are? Elena glanced at the papers, then let out a cold laugh. How would I know? Probably stolen goods that Maria went and sold, right? I told you she was light-fingered. Arthur pulled out his own phone, opened his banking application, and placed it next to the receipts. The screen displayed the transaction history of the secondary account. November 12th. Maria sold her mother's necklace for $45. On that same day, you transferred $5,000 into an online casino account. The smile on Elena's face froze. December 15th. Maria sold her only warm winter coat for $10. On the same day, you charged $500 at a Chanel boutique. Arthur looked up, staring directly into his wife's eyes. And here is what she did with that tiny amount of money. He placed the receipts for fever reducers, milk, and soup on top of the pawn slips. She sold her warm clothing to buy medicine for my daughter. And you, You used my daughter's medication money to buy handbags and gamble. You cut her pay. You threw her out on the street. You falsely accused an innocent woman. Did you think I was an idiot, Elena?" Elena's face turned from red to stark white. She took a step back, grasping the back of the chair. "You? What the hell are you talking about? Were you spying on me? This is an invasion of privacy. I'm your wife. I have the right to spend my husband's money. The right to spend money, yes, but not the right to try and kill my child." Arthur picked up the iPad. He unlocked the screen, locating the fateful audio file. His finger hovered over the play button for a second, then pressed down decisively. The chaotic sounds erupted, shattering the hospital corridor's silence, the shattering of objects, Elena's furious screams, Maria's desperate pleas, and most painfully, Lily's sobbing in the darkness. "You dare talk back to me? Security dragged this thief out of my house. Lily, don't die. Try to wait for your dad." Nurses and doctors passing by stopped. Patients' families in other waiting rooms turned their attention to the scene. The screams from the iPad echoed like a public conviction. Elena lunged like an animal cornered. She reached across the table, trying to snatch the iPad to silence the accusing sound. "Turn that off, you monster! How dare you humiliate me in public!" But Arthur's lawyer was quicker. He easily intercepted her hand, pushing her back. "Calm down, Mrs. Sterling. You don't want to add disturbing the peace to your lengthy list of charges." Elena trembled, her chest heaving violently. She looked around, seeing the looks of contempt aimed at her. She turned back to Arthur, changing tactics, her voice shifting to pathetic pleading. "Arthur, listen to me. I was just agitated. I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. I'll go to rehab. I'll change. Don't do this to me. We're married." Arthur looked at her, his expression empty, devoid of any feeling. "Yes, we are married. And that was the biggest mistake of my life." The police chief, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. He pulled out an arrest warrant stamped with bright red seals from his jacket pocket. "Mrs. Elena Vance," he read loudly, his voice firm. "You are under immediate arrest for the following charges: aggravated child mistreatment, false imprisonment, extortion and defamation, embezzlement of funds. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The two officers behind him stepped forward. They twisted Elena's arms behind her back. The handcuffs clicked coldly onto her wrists. Elena struggled wildly. She thrashed out at the officers, screaming obscenities, her mask of luxury completely shattered, revealing a cruel and greedy person. "Let go of me. I didn't do anything wrong. What's wrong with disciplining my husband's child? She's useless. Arthur, you ungrateful wretch, I'll sue you. I'll take all your assets." "Take her away," the chief ordered. They dragged Elena down the hospital corridor. Her screams faded, ceasing entirely when the elevator doors closed. The surrounding crowd whispered, but everyone seemed to let out a collective sigh of relief. Arthur stood watching the closed elevator door. He straightened his jacket collar, taking a long, deep breath. There was no sense of triumphant celebration, only immense relief. The malignancy had been removed. Now it was time to heal the wounds. He turned and walked toward Lily's room. The corridor was strangely quiet now. He placed his hand on the doorknob, gently pushing the door inward. The room was filled with light from the large window. On the hospital bed, Lily was awake. She was curled up, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. Her swollen eyes still had red streaks, her expression bewildered and confused like a small bird that had just weathered a great storm. Arthur walked in, trying not to make a sound, but the hospital floor still echoed his soft footsteps. Lily started. She turned her head, seeing the large man approaching. The deep-seated reflex of terror surged. She didn't recognize her father. In her eyes, he was just another threat. Lily recoiled, pulling the blanket completely over her head. Her small body trembled violently under the thin cover. Frightened whimpers escaped her throat, twisting Arthur's heart in pain. She still didn't believe the nightmare was over. She still thought she was in that dark room awaiting punishment. Arthur stopped in the middle of the room. He realized that Elena's arrest was only the beginning. Arthur did not approach the bed immediately. He slowly knelt on the cold floor, maintaining a safe distance at the foot of the bed, positioning his eyes lower than Lily's. "Lily," he called, his voice soft as a whisper. "It's Daddy. It's Arthur." The lump of blanket on the bed still trembled, showing no sign of opening. Faint sobs could be heard from inside. "Don't hurt me. I won't tell. I'm a good girl." Good. Arthur bit his lip to suppress his own sob. He waited patiently, neither rushing nor touching the blanket. He knew he had to wait until his daughter was ready. The hospital room door opened again. A nurse pushed a wheelchair inside. Sitting in the chair was Maria. She was still weak, her complexion pale, but her eyes shone with life. She had insisted the doctor let her visit Lily as soon as she woke up. "Lily," Maria called, her voice raspy but immensely warm. "It's Miss Maria. I brought you some soup." The lump of blanket on the bed stopped trembling. A brief silence. Then slowly, the edge of the blanket was pulled back slightly. A pair of large, fearful eyes peered out. Lily saw Maria sitting in the wheelchair, smiling at her. Then she looked down at the floor and saw her father kneeling there, his eyes red and filled with love. "Miss Maria," Lily whispered. "I'm here." Maria held out her hand. Lily threw the blanket off. She tried to move toward Maria, but her weakness made her stumble. Arthur rushed forward to catch her in time. This time, Lily didn't push him away. She clung tightly to his shirt, then reached out and grabbed Maria's hand. The three of them formed a circle of mutual support. Lily burst into racking sobs, the cathartic release after so many days of holding it in. "Auntie Elena, is she coming back?" Lily asked between sobs, her eyes darting toward the door. "She said she would lock me in the closet. She said Daddy didn't want me anymore." Arthur held his daughter tightly, smoothing her messy hair. "Never, my love. She is gone. The police took her away. She will never hurt you again. I promise you." Maria also squeezed Lily's small hand, nodding firmly. "That's right, little one. The nightmare's over. Now it's just Daddy, me, and you." In the days that followed, Lily gradually recovered physically, but the psychological scars were harder to heal. She still startled at loud noises. She was afraid of the dark and afraid of large, empty spaces. Arthur realized that the Lake Forest estate, with its long, echoing corridors and cold rooms, was the very place that had fostered his daughter's fear. He called his secretary right there at the hospital. "Sell the Lake Forest estate, immediately. Sell all the furnishings, too. I don't want to keep anything from that place." "But sir, it's our most valuable piece of property." "I don't care about the price. Sell it. I want to wipe every trace clean." Arthur bought a smaller wooden house in a quiet suburb near a clear lake. The house had a spacious flower-filled garden and many large windows to let the sunshine stream in everywhere. He personally chose the furnishings. No cold marble, no sharp sculptures, only warm wood, soft rugs, and comfortable sofas. The day he welcomed Lily and Maria home, Arthur carried out a personnel purge. He dismissed the entire old staff, the people who had been negligent or cowardly enough to ignore Elena's crimes. He kept only Maria. He offered her a position not as a maid, but as the housekeeper, a member of the family. The new life began with fundamental lessons for Arthur. He learned to do the things he previously considered mundane chores for others. "Daddy, the soup is too salty." Lily winced after tasting the first spoonful of chicken soup Arthur made. Arthur scratched his head, smiling sheepishly. "Is it? Let me make another batch. I'll use less salt next time." He learned to braid his daughter's pigtails. The large hands, accustomed to signing contracts, now fumbled awkwardly with the soft locks of hair. Maria had to stand nearby, guiding him every step of the way. "Not like that, Mr. Sterling. Be gentle. She'll be hurt." All right, I'm trying." Every afternoon, Arthur drove Lily to physical therapy himself. He refused to sit in the VIP waiting room with coffee and a newspaper. He went into the exercise room with his daughter. He learned how to massage his daughter's atrophied legs, learned how to support her when she practiced standing. He was the first to cheer when she shuffled forward by a centimeter, and the first to hug her when she cried out in pain. The lavish parties with wine and high society guests vanished. They were replaced by warm family dinners in the small kitchen. Laughter began to filter back into their lives. Lily was no longer the sad doll in the glass case. She started drawing again, started humming songs. One late winter evening, snow flurried outside the window. Arthur was working by the fireplace, the flickering firelight illuminating the warm room. Lily tentatively walked over. In her hand was a drawing. She wasn't using crutches, but held onto the edge of the sofa to move slowly. "Daddy," she called. Arthur looked up, smiling. "What is it, sweetie?" Lily climbed onto his lap, holding out the crayon drawing. It was a crude sketch. There was a wooden house, a huge smiling sun, and 3 people holding hands, a tall man, a long-haired woman, and a tiny girl in the middle. "Is this our home, sweetie?" Arthur asked, feeling his eyes burn. "Yes. Daddy, Miss Maria, and me." Lily nestled her head against his chest, yawning wide. "Daddy, it's so warm here." Arthur wrapped his arms around her, kissing the shampoo-scented hair. He felt his daughter's steady heartbeat, sensed the absolute trust she placed in him. She no longer startled violently. She had found her safe harbor. "Yes, my love," Arthur whispered. "It's very warm. Go to sleep." He gazed into the fire, knowing that the scars, no matter how deep, were slowly closing under the power of love and presence. Spring arrived late but splendidly in suburban Chicago. The brutal winter winds had retreated, yielding to golden sunlight and a cloudless blue sky. The snow melted, revealing a vibrant green lawn stretching from the wooden porch down to the edge of the glittering lake. Arthur Sterling stood in the yard, inhaling deeply the scent of moist soil, new tree sap, and freshly cut grass. 6 months. 6 months had passed since that fateful night. 6 months without cross-continental flights, without meetings lasting until midnight, without million-dollar contracts. There was only this house, this garden, and the 2 most important women in his life. Maria was busy clearing dry branches scattered across the lawn. She wore a simple floral dress, her dark hair neatly tied up. Her complexion had returned to a healthy pink. She no longer looked the gaunt, pale woman who had lain beneath the overpass. She hummed a cheerful Mexican tune as she worked, occasionally looking up to smile at Lily, who was sitting on the stone bench under the old oak tree. Today was a special day, a significant milestone. Dr. Anderson, after last week's checkup, had given a rare smile. "The child's muscles have recovered astonishingly. Her bones are stronger. I think it's time we try removing the leg brace. Let her walk barefoot on the soft grass. That is the best therapy." Arthur looked toward his daughter. Lily sat there dangling her legs. For the first time in years, those small feet were not bound by cold metal. She wore a lemon-yellow summer dress, her pale, bare feet resting lightly on the grass. But worry still flickered in her eyes. Her small hands gripped the edge of the stone bench so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked down at her feet as if at a stranger, both curious and hesitant. Would they be strong enough to hold her? Would she fall? Maria noticed her tension. She stopped working, stepped closer and knelt beside the stone bench. She gently brushed the stray locks of hair from Lily's forehead, her eyes filled with warm encouragement. "Don't be afraid, little one," Maria whispered. "The grass is soft. If you fall, it will be like falling into a cloud." Lily looked up at Maria, then looked further away where Arthur was waiting. Arthur stood about 10 steps away. He had removed his suit jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves to his elbows. He wasn't standing there, watching like an employer. He knelt on one knee on the lawn, lowering his center of gravity to Lily's eye level. He spread his arms wide, creating a safe and solid harbor. "Come on, my warrior," Arthur called, his voice clear and warm with no hint of urgency. "Are you ready?" Lily took a deep breath. Her small chest rose and fell. She looked at her father, then down at her bare feet. She slowly released her grip on the bench, pushing her hands against her knees to gain momentum. Maria stepped back, giving the child space, but remaining poised to rush forward if needed. Lily stood up. The moment her bare feet fully touched the grass, she shivered slightly at the cool sensation. Her legs trembled violently. Her body weight pressed down, causing her knees to wobble. She was weak and fragile, like a sapling in the wind. Arthur held his breath. He wanted to rush over and support her instantly, but he restrained himself. He knew she needed to conquer this moment herself. "You can do it," he said, his voice resolute. "Look at me, just 10 steps. Lily bit her lip. She found her balance. She looked straight into her father's eyes, which held absolute faith in her. That gaze was like an invisible cord pulling her forward. Lily lifted her left foot. A difficult, clumsy movement. She placed her foot slightly forward. The first step. She staggered, her hands fumbling in the air. Maria let out a tiny gasp, but quickly muffled it. Lily didn't fall. She shifted her weight onto her left leg, pulling her right foot forward. The second step. Sweat beaded on her forehead, even though the weather wasn't hot. Each step was a battle with atrophied muscle fibers, with stiff joints, and most importantly, a battle with the memory of pain. The third step. The fourth step. A smile began to bloom on Lily's face, a smile of surprise and pure delight. She was walking. She was walking on her own 2 feet, no metal brace, no wheelchair, no help needed. The feeling of freedom spread from her heels to the top of her head. At the 5th step, excitement caused Lily to lose momentum. She lunged forward faster than her legs could keep up. "Daddy!" Arthur didn't wait any longer. He lunged forward like a flash of lightning. His strong arms caught the small body hurtling toward him. He hugged her tightly, lifting her clean off the ground. He stood up, spinning her once in the air. "You did it! My girl did it!" Arthur cheered, his laughter mixing with Lily's clear, ringing giggle. Maria stood beside them, clapping enthusiastically, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. She watched the scene, as if witnessing a miracle that she herself had helped nurture. Arthur set Lily down, but kept her securely in his embrace. He used a handkerchief to wipe the fine sweat from her forehead and nose. Lily's face was flushed from exertion, but her eyes sparkled brightly like 2 stars. However, when the laughter subsided, a momentary fear returned to the depths of her eyes. Lily clung tightly to Arthur's shoulder, her fingers twisting the fabric. She looked at her father, then looked toward the road leading out of the main gate where the black limousine used to take her father far away. "Daddy," Lily whispered, her voice tiny. "What is it, my love? Are you going on a business trip again? Are you going on a plane and leaving me home alone again?" The innocent question hung in the still garden air, weighing 1,000 pounds. Arthur felt his heart constrict. He knew the fear of abandonment was still there, lurking in his daughter's tender soul, ready to resurface whenever joy faded. Arthur didn't answer immediately. He looked deep into her eyes, then turned to look at Maria. The woman smiled at him, a look of compassion and trust. He shook his head firmly. Arthur took Lily's small hand and pressed it against his left chest. Beneath his shirt, his heart was beating strong and steady. "Do you feel that?" Arthur asked. Lily nodded. "I'm not going anywhere. No business trip, no contract is more important than you are. I've missed too much already. I will not miss another minute." He kissed his daughter softly on the forehead, inhaling the scent of sunshine and grass in her hair. "I am right here, Lily. Right now. And I'm not leaving again. I promise." Lily buried her head in his neck, sighing with relief. She believed him. This time, she truly believed him. Because her father wasn't just speaking with words. He had spoken with his presence for the past 6 months. Maria stepped closer, placing her hand on Arthur and Lily's shoulders. The 3 of them stood there embracing under the bright afternoon sun. Their shadows stretched long across the green lawn, merging into one solid, inseparable unit. The spring breeze rustled through the old oak leaves like a round of applause. There was no longer any trace of the cold estate, no sound of screams in the blizzard. Only the peace of a real family remained, a family mended from broken pieces, rebuilt not with money, but with presence and love. And that is our bedtime story for today. Thank you so much for staying with Arthur, Lily, and Maria through this incredible journey of broken trust and ultimate redemption. We hope this has been one of those truly heartwarming stories that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. What part of the story resonated with you the most? Were you cheering when Arthur finally found the proof he needed, or were you moved by Maria's quiet sacrifice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We find this to be one of the most touching stories about learning what truly matters in life. The enduring lesson here, especially as we reflect on Arthur's transformation, is a profound one. True wealth is not measured by the size of your portfolio or the grandeur of your estate, but by the safety, love, and presence you provide for those who depend on you. Arthur learned that the biggest deals in life are not signed in boardrooms, but sealed with a promise to family. May we all remember to prioritize presence over profit and cherish the loved ones nestled safely under our own roof. Good night, and we hope to see you next time for more stories of life, love, and second chances.